Thank you for everybody to join us over the world and here in Ghent. We have a beautiful crowd, although the camera is on Anthony. We have a fantastic group of people here sitting as well, very interested in discovering Anthony's art. And like Raffaella said, his art is quite unique. And the moment that I saw his art the first time, I was totally sold to his artwork. So I hope you enjoy this time with Anthony, and I would say let's start with
Let's
this.
start. As you said before, I think it's important to highlight that I work from within a system where there is this performance-oriented society and there's a lot of this fast culture and this fast replies, this media and the global urgency of change and hence the title rivers shaping mountains is for me about accepting the inevitable existence of hierarchy, which is the system and things that are not necessarily movable because there will always be a superposition. And on the other hand, it's reminding ourselves that this mountain is, in a way, shapeable. It has a plasticity. So perhaps by small actions or arts, we can slowly change its foundations, or like a river that polishes a rock, make things a bit more softer. So, and I always think on this quote from a movie. It's called Cloud Atlas. And there was this young composer running into the office and going to its father and said like, "Oh, I made this great piece and I want to publish it." And his father was like, "Oh, but you're never going to be a good composer. You should get rid of your dreams." On that time, there was his friend in the room. He replied, "But what is an ocean but a multitude of drops?" And I found that very resonating with my practice as well. I'm trying to find answers or trying to create change in a very gentle way, not necessarily providing a clear and all solving answer, but just giving gentle taps into a right direction. So I'll start perhaps in where most of the things start. It's the first slide, I'd say. This is the atelier, and before jumping to the highly polished works, it all starts a bit from this chaotic space where I work a lot from building on from the ground, and materials that you see are often very organic, but mostly only organic material or natural materials that I found during some night walks or forest visitations or dumpster diving. So a lot of objects and materials that carry a certain history that I find interesting to work with. You can see a bit, there's some stuff there that is halfly finished or still worked upon. So I have this space in my atelier where I just put and drop some things that I find interesting. And for me, it's in a way a bit of some kind of a kitchen where you can choose your spices and put them together and see if they smell good or look good, and perhaps even tell a story, or it's trying to figure out whether or not they become something more by adding two different pieces together and yeah, seeing what comes out of it. So the experimentation is a very important part. And on the other hand, so these types of works often are very hands-on. And on the other hand, I also have these concepts that arrive from a space where I question how we can connect the landscape a bit more. So which or the outer world with our inner world, etc. And so about a bit more conceptual works that I start drawing out or writing down, and I leave them out for some time just to ripen, and then eventually I continue the drawing and start working with the materials. For example, here, this is an example of work that I'm now working on. It's super rough. It's not clear. It's not clean, but I think it's a good thing to show that not everything goes straight to the point of a clean product or a clean object. This is one of my works that I made and finished after the COVID period, I guess. It's called Pampa, and the main idea here was to work with these cane or pampa grass. I don't know if it's the correct word in English. As a single strong, it's not super strong, but if we combine them, they really have a lot of resistance. And I didn't want to create this big surface. I just wanted to have this little roll that just supports us and to just supports us just enough and not to overcompensate on comfort, etc. Because I think sitting it's good, but I like to say active. So I always try to play with the boundary of not over pushing our comfort and because society nowadays is very good at that. And on the right side, you'll see a piece of the leg. I did with some of my younger objects, I provided a paper inside, which basically is some kind of afterlife or life agency for the work, on which I describe on when to gather or when to replace the canes that are inside, or the materials that were used, or where to or how to harvest the grasses or the organic material, etc. So it's about thinking on what happens after we are gone, or if something goes wrong with the object and I would not be present. So it's trying to really value everything that we are working with, even though if it's just a chair or a piece of metal, etc. I inserted this one to keep myself a bit more calm. But also this was during one of my walks in Argentina. I went up to the mountains, and it was it was quite of an extraordinary experience there, because I came to a point where there was no sign of human intervention or whatever, and I was walking to this to watch a waterfall, and I came on the road. I came across this little oasis, and for me it was between the period that I was really finishing this previous work, and so the idea of bringing a memory into an object, for example, or carrying it with me, this I really like to play with. So I continue this way. This is Iris, and here was the same idea to go outside and go search for the materials and go to the grasses. So eventually you charge up this object that you have a very perhaps an even personal relationship with, and nice memoirs that bring you a bit more peace. And but I also liked with this work that it's carried some kind of archetype of the hut and really creates a place that perhaps even reconnects us with our roots of living and spacious and how we deal with it. Morpheus is one of the demigods in Greek mythology. It's the god of sleep and hypnosis. And this work started when I was sitting in my study room, and it was a very sunny day, and the clouds were passing by, and there was a lot of wind. So you've all experienced it, that at a certain point the whole light drops and goes back on, and it goes back softly and a bit lighter. And I tried to integrate this display of light within this object. So in the center there is light normally, and so it really practiced this calming atmosphere in the space, and so in that way the object became some kind of a tool to help us relax or even fall asleep. These are works that I gave myself a go sign to create it when I was asked to participate in a festival of the Design Museum here in Ghent. It was called Be Wild, Act and Change. And I thought it was quite a funny idea to put one of my works on top of the roof of the museum and really connect what's happening outside and inside. So on the right, we have this windmill and which I made with a lot of recycled materials, and I tried to give it a bit more of a funny look, because nowadays windmills can be very slick and a bit boring. And yeah, and on the left side, so perhaps on the next slide, you'll see there is a video from inside the museum on the left top. So it's for me, it's about the direct translation of what's happening outside, and so the light starts breathing and becomes the object becomes some kind of signalizer if there is too much wind outside or it's just a little breeze outside. And I find it also interesting to think about on how the climate or what's happening on a global scale when it comes to climate, and if storms are formed, or and on how that is actually the same on what's happening inside of our minds on a psychological level. So in that way, we are also related when it comes to emotions. That I'd like to think that it's also something that's happening on a planetary scale, and then, for example, frictions of our plates, etc. Just a fun anecdote. This is another example of playing with interior, exterior. It's an object that is it's called papillons, and papillons papillon is butterfly in French. And the materials that I used, it started with basically this capiz shell. It's a transparent oyster shell. And my dad brought it to me. He picked it up from a secondhand market. I got this bag, and I was like, okay. I was really fascinated by the materials, and I started to put them together. And I really because they have this transparency, and it catches the light a bit, but I didn't necessarily wanted to play with that, although it's a unique quality. But when I placed them together, you had this kind of a V shape, and it reminded me a bit more of the butterfly, and because of its morbidness, because it's you can feel it's still a bit dead. I started to imagine, okay, how could I let them come to life a bit more, and in connection with the butterfly often moves when it's sitting in the sun as well. This is when the sun arrives, and we had this little solar panel, and the idea was to install the work inside, and when you have your sunny spot in the garden, you could put the panel there. So when you're working inside and being very occupied with what you're doing, there were nine of them. These 9 butterflies started to slowly open and close, so playfully interacting with each other and having a very hypnotizing experience, and telling you to go outside and get some sun. This is one of my biggest and heaviest sculptures, Nayat. It's basically, it started from the idea also when it's raining, we often get quite droopy and but water is life, and it's most important aspect of the existence of life, I guess. And so it's basically, I designed it to be part of a filtration system of water, of rainwater, to partially mimic the process in nature. Yeah. So I made it with different scales. It's a piece fully made out of ceramic. So there are 30 different tiles meshed together. So you can take them out from each other and put them back in place. But you can't really see it. But I placed these pieces of clay on top of my wrists and started to give them texture or make all these little tiny holes with a steel brush. And this texture allows it partially to absorb some of the water, but also you could grow mosses and algae on it, specific types of mosses and algae that regulate the acidity of the rainwater, which is very common in when we're living in cities because of all the pollution in the area. So it's not a complete filter, but it can be seen as one of the steps. Also, the scales help to add a lot of oxygen to the water. So nowadays we have all the water running in tubes and pipes, and it becomes something super obvious, and it's not necessarily happy water. And there is a big difference between happy water or water that just runs from the tap. You can see it when it would be crystallized, etc. The shapes it made, etc. The important part here for me was to create this object that is quite monumental and actually just claims space for what really matters or what's most essential in spaces we live in, for example. So it's an ode to water and basically to its sacrality. We have necessities for water eventually, but we also have to work once in a while. And it was a desk that I made for myself. So some time ago. And what I really found interesting, or what I really liked, I imagined it to have a lot of my papers on top of it and to carry this lightness, because also as a way to remember myself not to take work too seriously also and keep it light. And it that hence the shapes and I yeah, when I first imagined it, I just imagined like 3 pieces of paper and as if everything was floating on top of it. And so that's basically with my functional pieces. I try to maintain this airiness and lightness and some type of minimalism, but not necessarily fully minimalism. I just still want to feel that the object in a way has a way of almost coming to life, and to help us reconnect with the idea that material is not just something still or that object, etc., and to really amplify this idea. A client came to me and asked me to have the previous piece. We can go to the next slide as well. And the difference was, okay, the first one was a table, and then I had to make a bench. So the trick here was to maintain its lightness, but then again it needed to be a lot more stronger. So I played a lot with the trompe-l'oeil effect and really thin out the edges, and added a big metal bridge underneath, so it could really support everything, and it was from the idea that the object would survive almost 100 years or over 100 years. And there are some small details on the right picture. You can see it a bit more clearly. Because when I'm creating it, I'm having this very sensual experience, and it also has a very sensual vibe or sensation, I think, in its shape. But it's important for me to add the signature of the hand inside. So I played with the welding process in order for the objects to maintain a certain humanity. And at the next slide, we have the same story there that I really like to take time, and in this case really took a lot of time of making these little carves, and this repetition within the object gave it, for me, while creating it, it's a very meditative experience. And so I can think on a lot of stuff in between, but it's just such a simple act. You have to just give it direction, and then in the meantime, it's quite liberating for the mind. So perhaps when it goes on to mindful exercises, this work is Alba. It's made from alabaster stone, and I wanted to create a work that claims space as well for the little things in life. And at the core of the object, there is a little box, and the idea was to put a little flower in there perhaps from your first date, or the first ring you got, or to really cherish these little things from your past and from this memoir. I really, claiming space for that. And it was part of it's the first one that I made, but I'm going to make several ones, different shapes, of course, and different materials according to the memory. And it was called Housing a Memory. So, and the next work, it's a bit of a similar story, except for this is more a tool for manifestation. And I wanted to create this object that allowed me to write an intention or a dream or a desire that I wanted to pursue, and make it some kind of like a light beacon. It does not give light, although people often think it. And I called this one Faro. And Faro is lighthouse in Spanish. So I found it a nice, I found it a good name for it, as if it's a kind of beacon of hope. And I wanted it to be sealed off and protected in a way. But then still, if you would walk by it, you'd still have a glimpse of the paper or the little thing that you wrote inside. And it's not necessarily about knowing or seeing what you exactly wrote upon it, but it's just more to sustain the idea of your intention, because it's never really the literal thing that you want, because it's always just an energy and something that constantly changes over time. And I played with the materials in such a way that alabaster stone, it's the white cylindrical part. It's a bit of an anecdote, perhaps. Alabaster stone is a stone that they used a lot in Egypt, and was found as eggs in near burial sites because they believed it captured the sun. And they took it along with their graves because they believed it could help them to travel faster to the sun god. So in this pattern of thinking, I'd like to continue, because I believe materials have a certain way to perhaps even amplify intentions or certain things that are implemented. For example, also the copper mesh around it was perhaps even protected from radiation, and the steel that becomes a material that really centralizes or grounds our thoughts or energy. This is Kairos. And Kairos is also one of the Greek demigods. Is the little brother, perhaps, of Kronos. And Kronos is the literal or structured time and chronological time, of course, and the time we are using within our system. If you think about it, if we would take away this linear time or this structured time that we have, the 24-hour clock, then the whole economy would just, I think, basically crash because it's the way to regulate things and time things. So I wanted to provide another way of dealing with time and not necessarily measuring it, but offering a more gentle approach to it. The idea there was time is mainly influenced by gravity. So I'd like to play with the idea of gravity to activate time. So in the bottom containers, there is sand, and eventually you push it or you lift it up and pour the sand in the top ones, and they would start these two main wheels to propel mechanisms inside, and eventually push one of the hammers that hit the glass. So you get a starting point and an ending point, and it's you could install your time, but there is no visual notion of it, so you cannot see how far it is. But it's more like of a guess to get this a bit more fluid experience of time, because even though if you would install it exactly on 15 minutes and 30 minutes, the size of the grains will always change the speed of the momentum that is building up, because they're running out of this little tube, and if there is a little speck of dust, it might go a bit slower at some point. So there is no control, which was basically the whole point for me on this subject, is to activate your moment, but also to let go of control and really try to be present within whatever you you are doing. Also, this was Daki. It's a detail of a meditation stool that I made. I think perhaps one of the most important things to have inside our space is something to meditate and really focus upon the now. And I made this one with, it's going to be a series of them next, with roof slates, and that were discarded. So I got this whole batch from a friend who was organizing a shop called Scrap, and so basically he collects reusable materials from old construction sites and cleans them or gives them a new, perhaps a new home. So this is also a seating object. You can sit on it. There is a steel frame underneath, and it was recently adopted by the Design Museum in Ghent to be part of their collection. And this is a type of object that, because first I made this meditation stool, and this one just I played with because I have some leftovers, and I started just puzzling with them, and then the result was actually quite fun. So it's a bit more of a playful approach to it, and still has this very, in a way, Zen character. And what I really like about it is the texture that it contains, and even though because of the rock, perhaps even brings us to the mountainscapes, etc. And to really implement natural materials, raw natural materials inside the home can also have this very perhaps even relaxing energy. I needed more of the slates because the previous one I made a series of it, and so I found this guy on a 2-hour drive from home, and I went there. And I was like, oh, I bet they're a bit more purple. And he said, no, it's just on the surface. You can wash it off. And I was like, okay. And the shape was also a bit different, but I thought at the moment, like, okay, I can probably still just adjust it. And but no, it was not changeable. So I had to think about a different type of object, and it actually came quite organically. It sits quite low on the ground, and it gives, again, this minimum amount of comfort. But just by positioning the angles in the right angle, it really sustains us enough and gives more comfort than you would actually think, because not to overdo it. And it's a very grounding chair. So if you sit in it, we can really let your legs be loose, and it actually has like these two pressure points on the back that are really, really nice. And so these were the only ones that I could salvage from the batch that I bought, because these were the strong ones. And then in the next slide, so I had lots of them that really didn't no longer serve or did no longer serve to be implemented as a functional object, because they were a bit more brittle. And so here I started to make a composition with it, and it was a bit more radical. And in advance, they weren't the blue lines. It was something that later was added, because I had these two volumes that I saw next to each other, and I felt there was this tension and this energy in between them, and I couldn't really grasp it yet. So I tried to visualize that what was invisible, but then still sensible. And so in a way, I wanted this object it became something that perhaps even transcended its own material, and really tried to capture it as some kind of vessel that came to existence, not necessarily as a function, but just really you can feel it's something, and goes further than what is perhaps or what it was. So this is the first work that I actually really accepted in my practice to just be a sculpture, or because before that I really had to always think like it has to be something functional, or it has to serve something. And here I could just really let it go. So a bit of an important work. The next work is a similar one, in a way that I wanted, I found this huge piece of bark during one of my night walks. And in the next slide, you can see a bit more of the scale. And I found it, and I took it home, and I kept staring at it for like two years, I guess, until I really decided what I wanted to do with it, because it was such a unique piece, and started questioning myself, what do I do with it, and what does it tell, and try to perhaps even let it communicate to me. And the idea of the tree bark serving as a bridge between the outer world, speaking from the perspective of the tree, and protecting its space, its life within. I also decided to really embalm it, and I used a tree resin, Damar resin, and turned it into some kind of varnish, and mixed it with marble dust, and started really giving this protective layer, which you could really feel. It became some kind of even rock, or it almost became petrified, and has this, because of the marble dust, it has this glooming whiteness, and it's quite relaxing also. And basically the whole exterior part is the bark, and then at the center there's alabaster stone, which also had the same properties of the material, so it created this really nice and the symbols that are written around the whole were basically, when I was working the stone, and after hammering and grinding and chiseling the whole piece, by the vibrations of the table, there were these structures forming themselves. So I didn't want to write something necessarily with a literal meaning, but just more as a way to implement even the moment of its creation into the final product, and continue its story. Because of eventually I decided to, because I had a lot of questions on what I wanted it to become, and I decided to create this deep space within. I used the darkest black that is currently on the market, Musau black, which absorbs all the lights, and in order to create this empty, or eventually vast space that lays beyond, and that really makes you wonder, okay, what goes beyond and what's within and further. And that's just the way that I at the moment like to end the presentation, and to make us think on what goes beyond.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we can start. I'm back here. We can start with the Q&A.